Hitchcock's Psycho, and not Psycho, but more Rear Window, and I was thinking a lot about Vertigo with your
Vertigo.
novel.
Sure.
Yes. And the
Yeah.
San Francisco scenes. I mean, that's San Francisco, but there's still like this film noir aspect that is
Yeah.
actually in Mouth to Mouth. So like maybe let's start there. How inspired are you by, say, Hitchcock or these very like 1940s, 50s noir type films?
Right. Right. Consciously, not at all.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I'm so excited for today's guest. First, I want to introduce him. Antoine Wilson recently came out with the novel Mouth to Mouth, which is what I'm really here to talk to him about. But just some background information. Not only was Mouth to Mouth named one of Barack Obama's favorite books of 2022, which I just found out when I was researching about you, Antoine, which now I have a lot
Yeah.
of questions. Um, but he also is the
Me too.
you do? Okay.
Yeah.
But he's also the novelist of The Interloper and Panorama City. And we'll get into that because I want to know this whole process of his with how he went from theme to theme to theme. But his writing has appeared in the Paris Review, Quarterly West, Best New American Voices. He's a contributing editor to A Public Space. Is that a literary magazine,
Yeah,
Antoine?
yeah, it's a literary quarterly out of New York. It's Bridget Hughes is the founder and editor. She was at the Paris Review for many years, which is how I met her. And she, in fact, was the editor of Paris Review after George Plimpton died, and then she went
Oh
on to
wow.
found A Public Space.
Okay, thank you. And he also received the Carol Hawksmith Fiction Fellowship at the Wisconsin Institute for Creative Writing, and the San Fernando Valley Award for Fiction. He's been named a finalist for the National Magazine Award, and the Forward Magazine Book of the Year Award. So, Antoine, I am among a definitely well-known writer, someone who has won multiple awards. I am honored to be interviewing him. And I also found out he's teaching a course at Stanford, and he's taught at the University of Iowa, the University of California, San Diego, at UCLA. I don't know what you haven't done, Antoine. He was born in Montreal, raised in California and Saudi Arabia, and now lives with his family in Los Angeles. Okay, so
Yep.
we got all of your backgrounds um,
Wow.
out there. And I also love Montreal. I got a chance to
Oh
be there
yeah.
for a wedding that my father's best friend from college, his wife is from Montreal. So I have very fond memories. And I thought
It's
everyone in
beautiful.
Canada spoke French. I was like, oh, everyone in Canada is bilingual in French and English. And then I realized, no, it's just that area.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Um,
um, yeah.
yeah, the you mentioned the Valley Fiction Award. We like to call that the Northridge Nobel.
Oh, okay. Well, and I
Okay.
kind of was doing some research that you've been around a lot of California. Like now you're in
Yeah.
LA, but you know all of Southern California, Northern California, Central.
Yeah, more.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was 7, we left Montreal. So I was this little, or just about 7. I was this little French Canadian boy, and we moved to Madera, California, which is near Fresno in the Central Valley,
Oh, wow.
farm town essentially. And it was quite a shock. If you want to make a writer out of somebody, that's definitely a good ingredient, is to drop them into an entirely foreign environment over and over
Yeah.
again.
Well,
And we were
do
there for
you?
four
Yeah, yeah.
years, and then Santa Monica, then Saudi Arabia, and then we came back to Santa Monica.
Oh, wow. So what brought your family over to Saudi Arabia?
Um, it was always work. My dad was an orthopedic surgeon, and initially, there was an opportunity to move to the States, and that was in Madera because they had no orthopedic surgeon in Madera County. They needed somebody, so he's like a skilled foreign worker or whatever the visa category is. We got our green cards from that, and then he got lured down to LA, to Santa Monica, after 4 years in Madera, and didn't like the situation. He didn't like who he was working with. So, he could have just hung his own shingle or partnered with somebody else. But a friend of his pointed out an ad in one of the medical journals, come work in Saudi Arabia. So off we went on it. What would have been a 5-year adventure, but he caught hepatitis B from a patient and almost died. And so we were back after 1 year. So I just did 7th grade in Saudi Arabia. And then it was back to Quebec or Los Angeles. And my mother just said, we're going back to Los Angeles.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you find as a writer? I find this very interesting because LA, I'm on Long Island, but I'm a New York City person. Like that, I just came back from a visit with family in the Philly area. So I'm always really Northeastern based. And when I go to Southern California, we have family friends in Orange County. I've been to Universal, to Disneyland. And San Diego a few times. I find that the energy for writing, like I would assume that it's the community's different because of how Hollywood based LA is with acting. Do you
Yeah.
find differences with the Northeast compared to, say, especially Southern California?
Yeah. I mean, if you're living in Brooklyn, right, and you say to somebody, I'm a writer, they're going to probably assume that you're working on a novel, right? Or short stories, maybe, I don't know. And if you say to somebody here, you're a writer, they may assume that you are working for television or writing screenplays. And, you know, so there is definitely like a slant in the Hollywood direction. However, there's quite a thriving literary community here. It's always been here, but for instance, I was in the 90s, I was at UCLA, and so I was English and I was pre-med, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I really, at one point, decided, yeah, I want to be a novelist, right? I'm not going to go to medical school. So I didn't know any other writers, and I didn't know how to meet them. And I listened to Bookworm on the radio, that kind of thing. And since then, the internet has really connected people in a way that has made it possible for writers who are sort of outside the literary community to find opportunities to connect with writers who are sort of inside that literary community to join. And there's the sort of the green room at the Festival of Books is kind of an annual reunion, right, for like all the LA based writers. So we're pretty spread out. We meet up for lunch sometimes, some of us, but there is freedom in not having your next door neighbor also working on a novel. You get a really good sense of like how indifferent the world is to what you're trying to make, in a positive and negative way.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because I think of Jimmy Kimmel Live or the talk shows, the late night shows, that there's always that, oh, I know James Corden, and he does those flash mobs with musicals in one of the studio lots. I'm blanking on that area of Los Angeles, but I don't know. Studio City.
I don't remember which studio. Yeah, I mean, there are studios in different areas. The Burbank, there's some in Hollywood, there's Culver City. So I don't know where his show tapes.
Yeah, but like every studio lot has a Starbucks or like multiple Starbuckses.
Yeah.
I think like the stereotype is when you see all these people working on writing, it's like you said, that Sunset Boulevard, Hitchcock kind of, not Hitchcock, that's not Hitchcock, but the Sunset Boulevard type noir of, oh, everyone is writing their next breakout screenplay, and they're
do you remember Seattle's best coffee shops? I don't know if they still exist, but it was a competitor to Coffee Bean and Starbucks. And so there was one in Santa Monica on Montana Avenue, and I remember walking in there, and it was the spot. There were no sort of co-working spaces then and stuff, but it was a spot where people would go and open their laptops and be working, and so you'd walk in and it's just like every table is a coffee and a laptop open, and you think, look at all these suckers, like wannabes, like they're all working on their screenplays, they're all hoping to make their big break. And then you sort of like stop and take a look at who's really sitting there, and it's like, okay, there's like 3 Simpsons writers, right? And there's like Oscar nominated screenwriter, and like it was the place where people would just go to write. But you realize, oh no, like these are all, many of them are very highly successful writers who just wanted to get out of the house.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I think
depends on the
the reason,
neighborhood, right?
yeah, exactly. Well, and I think the reason Sunset Boulevard, and who created Sunset Boulevard? Why am I blanking on that director? I don't
Is
know.
it a Billy
It's
Wilder film, I
Yes,
think?
thank you, Billy
Yeah.
Wilder. Um, and but that was a very evocative film for me with the noir. But as I was reading Mouth to Mouth, listening to your excellent audiobook performer, we can shout him out. What is his name, Antoine?
Eduardo Ballerini. Yeah, he is
Yes.
phenomenal. Yeah.
And Antoine told me when I didn't hit record that Eduardo has been written up by the New York Times, so he's a featured audiobook performer.
Okay.
But like also Hitchcock's Psycho, and not Psycho, but more Rear Window, and I was thinking a lot about Vertigo with your
Vertigo.
novel.
Sure.
Yes. And the
Yeah.
San Francisco scenes. I mean, that's San Francisco, but there's still like this film noir aspect that is
Yeah.
actually in Mouth to Mouth. So like maybe let's start there. How inspired are you by, say, Hitchcock or these very like 1940s, 50s noir type films?
Right. Right. Consciously, not at all.
The Ivory Tower Boiler Room is so happy to welcome Broadview Press as our official sponsor. Broadview Press is an independent academic publisher in the humanities that produces high-quality, pedagogically useful books for use in university and college classrooms. They publish in the humanities, mainly in English studies, writing, philosophy, and history. They always publish with an eye towards diversity, so there is a strong list of titles from women, people of color, and other authors from marginalized groups. In the summer of 2022, they launched their new Broadview anthology of American literature, which increases diversity in the classroom because it rethinks the American canon and breathes new life into the American Literary Survey. It's actually been called, quote, the new gold standard in the field. I love using Broadview Press text in my own classroom at Stony Brook University. I can't wait to use the new anthology of American literature when I have the opportunity. And for all of you out there, Broadview Press has given us the official code Ivory Tower for 20% off site-wide on broadviewpress.com. Again, that is code Ivory Tower for 20% off.
Do you have a queer fascination with classic films? Ever wish you'd be transported back to that golden age of cinema as if you're in the movies themselves? Hi, my name is Christian Garcia, and I am the host of That Old Gay Classic Cinema. Join my friends and I as we travel back in time to that classic age of film and peel back the layers of how these films transformed our view behind the camera and into the lens of cinema. Make sure to follow my Instagram at That Old Gay Classic Cinema, and I'll be sure to save you a seat at our next showing. See you there.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
I mean, is that is that
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope that's not a dead end answer, but like this something interesting happened with my first novel, The Interloper, which was when it came out, it was described as a sort of neo-noir, which was a genre or a category that I had never heard of. And they referred to the James Cain ending of that novel. And I was like, who's James Cain? Like literally I'm Googling, trying to figure out where I've positioned myself. And part of, like, there's a sort of dual reason why that book came out the way it did. In terms of genre, I was really into Nabokov. And so, I'd read a ton of Nabokov. And so, like, I was looking at Lolita a lot and some of his other work. But Lolita is, in certain ways, like a send up of that kind of novel. Mm-hmm. It has that in it. And some of his other books are as well. So I'm kind of like the guy who wrote a science fiction movie, having only seen Spaceballs. Right. And then people say, oh, this is a reference to Star Wars. And I'm like, I've never seen Star Wars. So that's one aspect of it, was a sort of inherited forms. And then the other aspect of it is, the only reason I wrote The Interloper is because of a tragedy in my family, where my older half brother was murdered. And when I was a kid and he was 19, he was driving across the country. And I had this idea later of, like, what if I knew the guy who had done it was out on parole? And I was like, what if I bumped into that guy, right? How do you extract real justice from somebody? Like, how would I deal with that situation? And that got the ball rolling, sort of, as in terms of the cockamamie scheme that that Owen Patterson comes up with in that book. So I never would have written this sort of that particular neo-noir if I hadn't had, that experience in my family. I'm not really interested in crime writing as a genre to read.
And do you turn to your family experiences for most of the origin of your novels, or was that a rare case?
Well, yeah, I don't know that they come from the family, but I would say, imagination is definitely, obviously we can't create anything out of whole cloth, right? But we only know what we've absorbed. But memory and imagination are very much sort of tangled up in my process. So it's not like I'm writing autofiction, but there are definite, I could go through Mouth to Mouth, for instance, which has more pseudo autobiographical material than a lot of my other books. And I can mark, here's where this detail, here's where that detail comes from, especially the art world stuff and the UCLA stuff at the beginning.
Yeah, well, and something that fascinates me, I mean, we've both mentioned Vertigo, right? So for everyone out there, you need to watch Vertigo, the Hitchcock film. And maybe, watch it, read a little Mouth to Mouth, watch it. That could be a really interesting comp analysis when Mouth to Mouth is taught. But what's interesting, though, is Vertigo has that famous Hitchcockian femme fatale, that blonde bombshell, which there's been a lot of analysis about why was he so drawn to blonde women in his films. But right, she's saved from drowning, but here we actually have two men, and like that's why right away, without even really knowing, about you, Antoine, I'm like, oh, this is a queer noir novel.
Right. Right.
Just because of that engrossing, intoxicating, almost strangers on a train Hitchcock type film of like desire between them that can't be expressed, or more like, why is there this protagonist who is voyeuristically obsessed? Like, it's almost this compulsive obsession that you really draw into the psyche. So, maybe why did you not go for that femme fatale? Why is it a younger man who is breathing life into a drowning older man?
Yeah, I don't know maybe I should be on a couch right now. No, but now going back to The Interloper, the premise of that is this guy who's in a marriage where his brother-in-law is murdered, like, while he and his wife are on their honeymoon, and a year later she's still in mourning, and he's trying to figure out how to extract real justice from the killer, who's in jail. And after some false starts, he starts writing to the killer in jail as a woman. His idea being that he wants to seduce this killer and break his heart, and that's how he's going to do it. But of course, he gets sort of caught up, in his own trap. It's like a clever scheme, but not a wise one. So, but my wife's father's writing partner read it this is back in 2008 or something like that, and he said to me at like a party, he goes, I figured it out, he's a repressed homosexual. And I'm like, this guy writes mysteries, right? So he wants the solution to the whole thing. But I thought, okay, it's an interesting thing. That's definitely a relationship of attempted seduction between two men, and mouth to mouth is a younger man fascinated with an older man. In terms of it's more of a role model, kind of situation. I mean, would you say like is All About Eve a queer film because it's a woman and another woman? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of.
I know. I think it's
queer-
cool.
yeah.
I think I'd love to read somebody like pulling that apart and seeing what they bring to it. But in terms of a femme fatale, yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
Well,
I guess it just didn't occur to me for this project.
Yeah, well, and can there be a male fatale? I don't. There's a lot made. Like something that's fascinating is how much the attractiveness of Jeff, your protagonist, how
Right.
attractive he is. Like
Yeah.
that even the man, I can give this away to everyone out
Yeah.
there because it happens at the beginning, but he saves this older man who he finds out is an art dealer, very well known, established.
Yeah.
He saves his life, and that the art dealer though makes a lot out of his attraction when Jeff starts to work for him. And
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Yeah.
another employee, Marcus, who is at least flexible, makes a point of saying, okay, yeah, no, you're pretty, you can sit in the front, like, and we don't want to get accused of only putting pretty girls at the front of the gallery, so we can put you there. And
yeah, I thought that was an interesting line. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Subversive reading happening.
Right. Yeah, and the narrator, the unnamed narrator, does remark sort of on how Jeff was this thrift store Adonis, this good-looking guy. And I think to a large extent, I just kind of wanted to like stack things in Jeff's favor that he's not aware of. So Jeff kind of goes up the glass escalator of privilege. And in a lot of ways, this story is about him not acknowledging his own ambition and the dark side of that ambition. So he kind of thinks that all these pieces just fell into place because he's Jeff, and so I think being, a good-looking guy really helps him on his journey to the top.
Yeah, well, and I've interviewed, I'm a gay man, and I've interviewed so many LGBTQ writers, and especially like seeing what's in queer noirs right now. There's been some really intriguing, almost like bringing Patricia Highsmith back, but at full throttle,
Right,
with like
Ripley.
The Price of Saw, and Talented Mr. Ripley is a great example. What I even think Strangers on a Train actually was a novel first.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So what I love is though that you really bring these elements, but to set it in an art dealer, in a gallery, I thought was really interesting because like you even just mentioned the word flexible with that one employee, that he might be sexually flexible.
Right.
Because the art dealer world is it's almost like going into Condé Nast Vogue with Anna Wintour. It has that same, the ins and outs of the business. Like the stakes are really high for the people in that profession, but outside of it, everyone's thinking, wait, what's so stressful about this situation?
Like like when you're watching The Devil Wears Prada and you're sort of like, just quit. Right, just go exit this crazy microcosm. I mean, one thing that's cool about the art world and interesting about it to me is just the question of value, right? And this comes from personal experience. Like after college, I worked for a fine art and rare book appraiser in Beverly Hills. So we were in and out of all the galleries there and dealing with international galleries and then the auction houses and all that kind of stuff. So I came in as a transcriptionist, essentially transcribing my boss's descriptions of the artworks that she saw when she's like doing an inspection for, you know, somebody's collection. And so, and I didn't know anything about art other than, you know, what anybody picks up along the way. But contemporary fine art, nothing. And so I learned about contemporary modern fine art from, you know, the research that I had to do as we were writing up these reports for artworks that we were looking at and appraising, and from auction catalogs. So I came to appreciate contemporary art in a deeper way than I had before. And I'm a fan of a lot of this art, but it also came with the price tag attached, right? As opposed to like an art history class in college. Like I went to the Pompidou and walked around the galleries, and I'm like, oh, Agnes Martin and Franz Klein and Clifford Still, and you know, like I know all these people, I know where these works are in their history, and like, but I also know how much each one should be insured for, right? And so there's this weird, and I always felt kind of icky about it. I had a real ambivalence about this, you know, loving the art, but also trying to assess the value of it. And I don't know, as you said, it's a fascinating world that looks strange from the outside, in part because those dollar figures just don't compute compared to other real world things, you know, like the most expensive house in my neighborhood, you know, doesn't add up to the price of some painting, this new Mondrian that's going on the market, you know, or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's what they're worth, because that's what people agree that they're worth.
So I find it fascinating that you said it in Beverly Hills because, you know, like full disclosure, we work the Ivory Tower Boiler Room with a art gallery in Chelsea that is a nonprofit, empowers female artists and queer artists. But again, like we've had conversations about all those dynamics in Chelsea with the different art galleries and, you know, who are the buyers and who's kind of not accepted into those spaces. And there's like, you worked in appraisal, so you understand those ins and outs of who is sometimes you just don't have the money to be part of these circles.
Right.
So,
well, even, you know, even if you do have the money, sometimes, you know, these people get sold, they won't get sold the prime paintings unless they have the relationships in addition to the money.
That's true. Well, and so I think in Beverly Hills, again, I love that you use this as a location because I'm so keyed in on Rodeo Drive and more of the fashion elements of Beverly Hills. So, but again, I like that you're showing this art world that I know exists in Beverly Hills. It's just not necessarily in the public zeitgeist. So, you know, why Beverly Hills? Like, what's so important for you about that setting in your novel?
The unvarnished, honest truth is because that's where I worked as a you know, my job was there. Pace Wildenstein was there, Gagosian was there at the time, and Sotheby's and Christie's were there. So it was ground zero for a lot of you know, high-end contemporary fine art. And it's also just a very strange place. Like when I first started working there, I had grown up in Santa Monica for the most part, but the culture in Beverly Hills is so different. And just walking around there, my first thought was, this is freakier than, you know, the Venice Boardwalk, but these people don't know they're freaks. Like they think they're at the center of the universe. And so it's just, I don't know, just a lot of wealth on display, and people unleashed in some ways because of that wealth.
Yeah, but I think what's interesting is that we're not given anything about California because all of this narrative is being told at JFK in New York City. So it's like New York City is actually where the narrator is getting all this information from Jeff, as Jeff is just throwing everything onto him. So yeah, I like though that you really play around with New York City, Los Angeles, and you know, the airport setting is intriguing to me. Like again, why is it as a process? How did you know, okay, I need a narrator? Like, I need someone who is receiving the information, but it's
Yeah.
not coming from Jeff himself.
Right. Well, so my first two novels are first person, directed at the reader. The first one is a document written by the narrator. The second one are cassette tapes recorded by the narrator, ostensibly. And then this one, I had my, sort of my longest early draft of this was about, it was about 1.5 times as long as this book. And it never got anywhere good, never got anywhere near an ending. And that Jeff narrated from the start. And one of the reasons it never got anywhere near an ending was I never quite settled into, I was never comfortable with having Jeff's voice up front and center. And so it was while I kept abandoning this book, and I would switch to another one and then abandon that one and go back and forth. The other one remains abandoned, sadly. But I was reading Austerlitz by W.G. Sebald while working on the other one. And I thought, oh, maybe this is what I need to try, this unnamed, almost authorial stand-in narrator who is part of conveying the story to the reader. And what it ended up doing was sort of put Jeff's storytelling, onto the stage. So you're witnessing the act of the telling of the story. And that really became more of sort of the core of what the book is about, in terms of like, what are the stories we tell ourselves for how we got to where we are. These characters are in middle age. It's one of those periods in life where you might stop and take a look around, especially if you're successful, and go, how did I get here? Like the Talking Heads song, right? And so that's what Jeff is doing. And so having that telling sort of as part of the action of the book, made it all click for me. And that's when I was able to actually start the first draft of what it became, if you know what I mean. The final first draft. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there's such a history of, especially in these obsessive tutelage type narratives of one, and usually they are men in this genealogy, I guess, of the noir, but who they're trying to model themselves off of the successful man, that in this whole voyeuristic encounter, the narrator though kind of serves like a Great Gatsby, Nick Carraway type narrator, where again, you wonder how much is the narrator infatuated? Like, how much is he voyeuristically enjoying what Jeff is telling him? Like, it's this passing down where Jeff is invested in Francis Arsenault, the art dealer, and obsessed with who he is. The narrator is obsessed with Jeff. So
I don't know if the narrator is obsessed with Jeff. He's been buttonholed by Jeff, kind of, and sort of for the for most of the book, I would say the narrator is being subjected to Jeff, and the narrator even declares that he's not going to write the book. He gets a sense maybe Jeff wants me to write this as a book, but I'm not going to write this book. However, he does, right, in the end. So yes, by the end, he may be a little bit obsessed with Jeff because of what comes to light by the end of the book.
Yeah. Well, and is it really helpful? I'm assuming it's so helpful for you as the writer to just have so many layers, like, of how this narrative is transmitted, of even just causing unreliability with this oral storytelling from Jeff, like questioning, okay, is that exactly what was happening in how everything is going on with his rise to fame in the art dealer world?
Right. Well, and I all first person narrators are unreliable, right? Even the ones that are supposed to be not unreliable. And it's true in life. We even if, no matter how sincere we are, we're unreliable, because there's the part of our brain that generates this language when we talk about ourselves is interested only in plausibility, not in truth. So, it's sort of whatever works. There are these famous where the corpus callosum is severed, right? To prevent surgically to prevent epileptic seizures, because it'll keep the seizure from moving to the other half of the brain, kind of thing. And these patients who had this surgery seemed perfectly normal until they started trying these different experiments on them by giving stimuli to just one half of the brain. So the classic example is they showed the right side of the brain, essentially, using the visual field, the word walk. And so the patient would stand up and go to walk, and they'd say, hey, where are you going? And then the left side of the brain, where that sort of language is generated to answer for things or justify it, would kick in, and then they'd say, oh, I just wanted to get a Coke. Right? And so they come up with the justification for doing the action that they're not even aware of why they did it, right? So that happens all the time. You see it with kids a lot. It's really fun to watch kids try to justify their actions, and they suspect that they're making it up, but they're kind of going to try to make it, get it past you. So in any case, that's where the first person unreliability comes from for me. And definitely interested in storytelling and received stories. And I love having present action that's fairly static because they're in this transitional place, the airport lounge, where you might be apt to open up and tell this kind of story. And it's somebody he knew back in the day, but is probably never going to see again. So there's a kind of confessional aspect to it. So that's almost, those are some of the things I liked about doing that.
Yeah, almost like Why on Vacation, strangers will tell you everything that's ever happened in their life, but then would never disclose some of those moments to their family members.
Right.
Right. And yeah, so no, thank you for explaining that, Antoine. And, I also love that you dwell a lot on this theme, philosophical belief, but like, why did Jeff meet Francis and know that he had to save him from drowning? Like, why was that his, almost seeing it as his destiny? But right, are we actually in control of our path in life? Like, are we able to are we cognizant of, okay, we're going to go from A, B to C,
right? And
how much of that is actually put upon us from an outside universal force, right? So it seems like that's something in Mouth to Mouth you're really grappling with, is our fate.
Yeah, well, our sense of agency, right? And for Jeff, he's, if he hadn't been on the beach at that moment when he sees Francis bobbing in the water, and for Jeff almost feels like he had no choice, right? He said, like, it's like he had a gun to his head. Like, you have to try to save somebody. You're not just going to turn around and walk away, if you consider yourself a good person, or whatever. But that's an event that completely changes the course of Jeff's life, or determines the course of Jeff's life to some degree, that he ends up rescuing Francis. And it's just like one of fate's forks, right? That goes, and if he had never rescued Francis, who knows? He was kind of in a pause mode, open to that kind of thing. So I don't know. I mean, to me, the idea of fate is fascinating when you look at it in retrospect. It's one of those tools we use to make sense of our lives. Repackaged serendipity is what I like to call it, because a lot of the time, the things that end up determining where we end up are not necessarily those things that we planned ahead, but sometimes it's the things we stumbled upon. Often, life partners, right? That person, your husband or wife, you may have crossed paths with them when you were young and then recrossed paths, or, people love those kinds of stories where it's like just a coincidence that we bumped into each other, and then, but look, it was my soulmate. And, maybe there could have been a lot of other soulmates, but this is the one, so you look back and it feels like fate, but I think fate only really works in retrospect.
Yeah. So you mean I'm not going to find my soulmate on Grindr? And now, a message from the Gay and Lesbian Review.
Hello, listeners. This is Stephen Hemrick, the publisher of the GNLR, here with a special offer just for you. For those of you who aren't familiar with the GNLR, let me provide a little background. The GLR is a bi-monthly magazine of history, culture, and politics that publishes essays in a wide range of disciplines, as well as a slew of reviews of books, plays, and movies, and a number of special features such as artists' profiles and the popular art memo column. Each issue brings you consistently intelligent, lively, thought-provoking articles focused on a unifying theme and brings together the leading minds on the topic. You won't find a lot about the latest dating fads or fashion trends, though you might find articles about online dating as a social phenomenon or the gay influence on 20th century fashion. For example, the theme of the current issue is Queens and Kings, and it features an article by Andrew Holleran about Truman Capote's relationships with glamorous women, the women he called his swans. Now for the special offer. When you subscribe, you'll receive a free copy with any print or digital subscription. That's 7 issues instead of 6. Visit glreview.org. That's glreview.org. Click subscribe and enter promo code ITBR for your free issue. And as an added bonus, you'll receive online access to all archived issues of the magazine.
Hey, True Crime and Ivory Tower Boiler Room listeners. Listen, the holidays are literally right around the corner, and I know that some of you are scrambling to find that gift for that person on your list who is just so difficult to buy for because they have everything, or you're sitting there in your home and you're realizing that there is this space in your house that just is begging to be decorated, but you don't know what to put there. Well, I'm here to tell you that Mandy Made It has the answers to all of your holiday needs. Mandy Made It makes the best handmade crochet and crochet items I have ever seen. And I mean, literally, she can make anything. The customization options are literally endless. So go to @MandyMadeIt on Instagram and search Mandy Made It on Facebook. Slide into her DMs and order your customized holiday gifts and decorations today. That's @MandyMadeIt on Instagram. And Mandy is spelled MANDEE. Once again, search Mandy Made It on Instagram and Facebook. Slide in her DMs and order your gifts or holiday decorations today.
You could. I mean, why not?
I don't know how serendipitous that is, though. But
well, yeah, I think you'd have to have somebody who's like in the right state of mind, right? Like, especially on Grindr, right? It's like it's just like here for the hookup. But maybe you get somebody in like a different state of mind. It's like, yeah, I don't know. You never know.
Yeah,
never know.
But
where
you're right.
you'll meet
There is such an energy of those in-person encounters. I still think that that's for flirting or just how intimacy and desire works is when you see someone in person and you catch their eyes. That is much more powerful than on your screen, a message popping up.
Yeah, but you guys, I feel like you guys are lucky. I mean, I'm I'm just super happily married and very happy with where I am, right, in life. So I feel like I got lucky because there was a whole stage there in my, in my 20s or whatever, where it's like, how do you meet people? You can meet people like in school, but I don't think I ever met anybody in a bar that I went out with properly. Maybe other people are better at that game. And I feel like the younger generation, you have all these apps, and some are more hookup. Some friends who are divorced and are like, you know what? Right now, I don't need another partner. I'm just going to hook up with young people for a while, And it's just like, okay, that we all know what this is, right? But then, on the other hand, I feel like that there's a romanticizing that sort of eyes across the room, but you can have eyes across somebody who is really not good for you, right? Like somebody who's like, you guys feel that love connection, but then, a month into being together, you're like, oh, wow, this person's abusive, or this person's not, a fit for me. Whereas I feel like you guys get to look at so many qualities in who somebody might be, how they present themselves, etc., before you even, lay eyes on them. And then, then maybe you make that love connection. But, there was kind of a stigma against the apps back in the day, unless you were looking for a very particular thing. Like JDate was okay. If you're Jewish and you're looking to get married, you want to meet another Jewish person in LA, JDate's cool. But all the other apps was kind of like, it was like hiring a matchmaker or something.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's no stigma now, and it's kind of wonderful.
Yeah. Well, and, as we're wrapping up, I love all of the praise that is on the back for Mouth to Mouth, because these are some of those who are in your company. I'm not sure, you're all writer friends, but Lauren Groff, and Andrew Sean Greer, which talk about a queer, like a gay novelist who, has really been inventive with his narratives. I love his novel Less. How does it feel to be among this community and to be on Barack Obama's best books of 2022?
Well, I mean, the Obama thing is very strange. It's great. It came out of nowhere, right? It's sometimes you have a heads up, like you've been nominated for something, or your publisher is trying to send you for these awards or things, and there's no process for the Obama thing. It's just somebody told me probably just some bookseller put it in his hand, or he stumbled across it. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay. I got a text from my publicist, like all caps, wake up you need to check out, get on the internet. And so everybody found out from just, I guess, his Instagram or something like that. And I'm still I got to get a signed copy to him through friends of friends. I don't know if he would care to have a signed copy, but I'm still trying to figure out what to write. Like I keep getting stuck on like, Dear Barack. No, that's too familiar. I don't know him. Dear President Obama. Barack and Michelle. What do I write? I'm not going to write Thanks Obama. That I already ruled that out. But in terms of the blurbs, it's gratifying to be in a community of writers. And as I said, when I was in undergrad, I didn't know any other writers. And when I took some extension courses at UCLA, and then I wrote a fan letter to T.C. Boyle and took one of his undergrad classes at USC, which cost the same as a year at UCLA. Then I went to grad school, and suddenly I was among other writers who, and I called my mom before classes even started. Like had been there for 2 weeks in Iowa City, and I was like almost in tears, because I was just like, I found my people. Like I had never felt that to that degree before. So that's, I think, where that hit me the most and the strongest. And everything, like those blurbs and those other writers, that just feels like a continuation of that. But it feels like, I'm among my people. Like we're trying to do cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you can't beat having the New York Times review on your front cover saying that it's an enthralling literary puzzle. And I mean, we've talked about how intoxicating Mouth to Mouth is, how tense it is. It's, and I don't want to give away everything, how all the dominoes start to fall. But,
right.
Are you working on anything right now, Antoine, that you can tease us with?
Yeah, it's called Disappointing Follow-Up .docx.
I'm sure it's not going to be disappointing.
My well, if you look at the previous two books, all three books are very different from each other, and so I'm following like a bloodhound on a trail right now, which is good. However, the form of it that I'm working on that's allowing me to continue to generate it is, I think, probably unreadable, in the sense that I just keep adding to this one long sentence. And I think there are probably people who are going to talk me off that ledge. So it's a rough draft. I'll only say that, what can I tease you with? I'll tease you with I always wonder what happens after The Tempest is over, the play. Yeah. What happens, Prospero goes back to Milan. He gives up his magic. He becomes an administrator, And Miranda's married to the first man she met. How's that going? So maybe that's a launching point for something.
So we have some Shakespearean influence.
Maybe. Just
Okay.
a touch.
Okay.
A dash. Yeah.
Well, I will be excited for you to come back on and divulge it here.
Happy
But
to.
I can't, and I can't wait for everyone. Please get your hands or get your mouth on, well, depends how much you want to be intimate with this novel. But Antoine Wilson's Mouth to Mouth. It is available on, well, hardcover, of course, but I also think, is there a paperback coming out, Antoine?
Yeah, it's coming out in January.
Oh, good.
So that's
okay.
too long. It's too long to wait. You definitely want to get the hardcover.
No, get the hardcover. Or also you can listen to on Audible. Eduardo. I always want to. Yes, Eduardo's performance is just so well done, and it's very riveting. It's very fast paced as a novel, so the performance is also really just, I think it's an excellent almost radio play by itself. So
yeah, he's great at doing the different, characterizing the different voices without making it feel like he's doing voices. Yeah, exactly.
You're really getting the essence of the personalities. So I hope Mouth to Mouth appears in another form somewhere, on the stage. I think would be interesting. So I'm sure, Antoine, one of your team is shopping around for you.
No, it's just been optioned. So I've been talking to people for a while. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So that could be really fun. I'd like to see I like to see things transformed. I always I love to leave room for a reader so that people come back to me with their experiences of what they've read, with room for them to co-create. So I'd like to see this on screen in some transformed form.
Good. Yeah. A metamorphosis. We will.
Right.
In a different iteration, just like maybe what you're doing with The Tempest, but you don't want to disclose to us in full. No, I'm just kidding. But a retelling, maybe. Maybe it's going to be.
I think The Tempest. No, The Tempest would not make a good novel. It's a weirdly off balance kind of play. I love it, but it's. I think it's a terrible model for a novel. Trust me, I've tried. But no, it's just more sort of these characters got me thinking about. Way more family material going on right now. So we'll see, because these books transform themselves before I get to that final first draft, as I call it, which is the one that lets me get to the end. Yeah.
Okay, so we might be seeing something from you within a year to 2 years. Maybe not. Okay. I don't want to pressure you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I make no wine before it's time.
I like that. That's a good analogy. Okay.
Yeah.
But thank you, Antoine. Thank you to all of you listening. Please tell us all what you think of Mouth to Mouth. Antoine has a wonderful Instagram. So you can find that in the show notes, along with how to buy the book and how to listen to it. And this was wonderful. I can't wait to have you back, Antoine.
Fabulous. Thanks for having me, Andrew. This has been great.
Of course. Thank you. Okay. And bye to the listeners out there. Hi, Ivory Tower Boiler Room audience. It is Andrew Rimby, the director of the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Welcome to our winter season. And are you trying to stay warm this season? Well, guess what? We have the Ivory Tower Boiler Room Cafe. It is our Patreon where there is so much bonus content. So I'll go over all that. But first, it's only $5, which is less than a latte, a cappuccino, a coffee, a tea, basically anything now, because, we have some inflation going on. So join us on our Patreon, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. What do you get? You get Gregory Maguire giving us all the scoop on the Wicked movie musical. You get Jesse Green giving us his hot takes on the Broadway musical.
if you don't know who Jesse is, well, you should, because he's the chief theater critic of the New York Times. You get all the JFK and Marilyn Monroe scoop from Elizabeth Winder, a Marilyn Monroe biographer. So much more. You get all our video interviews. You can see everything, including the bonus content. And Mary's going to tell you from True Crime and Academia what you get later. But if you're not following us on social media and seeing our video teasers, well, you need that to stay, nice and energized on these winter days. So follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Ivory Tower Boiler Room. While it's still here, why don't you follow us on Twitter at Ivory Boiler Room? And here's my chief contributor, Mary.
Hey, True Crime friends and Ivory Tower Boiler Room friends. Like Andrew said, you're going to get access to all of this bonus content. That includes True Crime and Academia. So not only will you have access to the bonus episode each month, you will also have video access to the interviews that I conduct on my podcast once a month. You get all of that extra content at your fingertips whenever you feel like watching it, literally for a cup of coffee. So why don't you just buy us one? That'd be so nice. We would appreciate that because we love your support already, but we could use a little bit more if you don't mind.
Yes, we could. And also, hey, do you all know you can actually DM us questions at our social media channels? Yes. Also, why don't you ask us questions with our social media posts? We love it. We even shout out questions on our episodes. And if you want, you can always email us at ivorytowerboilerroom@gmail.com to actually order our merchandise. So we have hats, we have t-shirts, we have posters, we have everything. If you want any merchandise with the Ivory Tower Boiler Room logo, we're going to make it happen for you. Okay, on that note, happy winter season, everyone.
Happy winter.